March 7th, 2025 was the last day that Evan Barron talked to his dad. March 7th, 2025 was the last day that James David Barron spent on this earth. March 7th, 2025, after months and months of spiraling, after months and months of unhinged behavior, and after months and months of getting more and more obsessive and out of control, on March 7th of 2025, this defendant snapped for the last time. It started off fine, like any other day, but just like the many times in the last months and months and months, this defendant started another argument with David. And it was the same argument that she had been starting since December. Lilia. Since the day that the defendant found out about Lilia back in December, her relationship with David Barron didn't stand a chance. And I want you ladies and gentlemen to understand, reasonably so. I don't think anybody faults the defendant for feeling upset and angry when she found out that her boyfriend was sending money to a woman in a different country and paying for her daughter's rent. That's not what we're here to talk about. I don't want there to be any confusion about the fact that nobody liked David sending money to Lilia. His family didn't like it, his kids didn't like it, his ex-wife didn't like it. That's not the issue that we're here to talk about, is whether or not she had a right to be angry at David for sending money to Lilia. The question is how she handled the news of Lilia. That's why we're here. Because she didn't leave him, she didn't break up with him, she wanted to stay with him. She wanted to try and fix things. Great, that's her decision. She wants to stay with Mr. Barron, she loves Mr. Barron. She's so desperate and needy for love, and she feels like Mr. Barron is the love of her life, and so she wants to try and fix things with David. And so she finds out about Lilia, and she decides that she wants to stick it out, but at what cost? At what cost does this defendant go through to stick it out with David Barron? Constant questions, constant insecurities, constant arguments, constant fights, constant anger, constant aggression, reaching out to everybody about Lilia. Lilia was a secret to nobody in the defendant's world. She reached out to David's son. She reached out to David's ex-wife. She reached out to her sister Dana. She reached out to her sister Leslie. She reached out to Jen, to Jessica, to McLean, to Judy, to Mike. Anybody that would listen to her complain about Lilia heard about it. The obsession ran deeper than just the complaints to her friends and family, because she took to Facebook. She found Lilia on Facebook. She found Lilia's daughter on Facebook. She's messaging them. She's somehow getting their phone numbers. She's calling them. She's getting her sister to try and call them. She's looking at who Lilia's following on Facebook to see how many men are following her. She's getting her sister to use her real estate business to try and look things up about Lilia, to try and look things up about her daughter, to try and look things up about David. This obsession was so under her skin that it was literally all she thought about. It was all she talked about. It was all she argued with David about. It was all she ever wanted to talk about with anyone who was willing to listen. And she became unhinged. And that unhinged jealousy was not new to David, and it was not new to the defendant. Because before Lilia, there was Laura, and after Laura, there was Meg. And then came Lilia, and she just had a new reason to start fights with David Barron. She had a new reason to yell at David Barron. She had a new reason to focus her anger and her aggression and her obsession on Lilia. And so that brings us to the night of March 7th. And David did what he always did when this defendant would start a fight about Lilia: remove himself. over and over and over again. December 28th, went to a hotel. January 4th, went to a hotel. February 1st, tried to go to a hotel, wasn't allowed to get in and get his stuff. He was trying to leave, she wouldn't let him. February 16th, locks himself upstairs in the guest bedroom. March 7th, locks himself upstairs in the guest bedroom. And this defendant did what she always did. She got angry, she got obsessive, she got unhinged, and she spiraled. For the last time on March 7th. So David goes upstairs, he's in the bedroom, and she goes and gets her Glock. She goes and gets her Glock, she walks up the stairs, she gets the gun, six inches away from the door. She points, she listens, she aims, and she fires. And Mr. Barron is dead. And not only that, ladies and gentlemen, but we know that she was yelling threats to David before she fired that gun. Why do we know that? Because Mr. Barron is cowering behind a wall just on the other side of that locked door. He's hiding from this defendant. What is she screaming? I'm gonna shoot you, I'm gonna kill you. There's no telling what she's screaming. She's screaming something that's scary enough for Mr. Barron to feel the need to be literally hiding behind the wall, behind the locked door of the guest bedroom. So she gets in, she sees Mr. Barron face down in a pool of his own blood, and now she knows she's in trouble. That's where the cover-up begins. And now the defendant is in self-preservation mode. She sees Mr. Barron, she reaches down, checks his pulse, gets blood all over her hands. She doesn't feel a pulse. She knows she needs a defense now. She knows she's in trouble. So what does she do? She goes and gets Mr. Barron's gun. And we're going to talk about why the evidence proves that that gun was never in the possession of David Barron that night, why that gun was never in that bedroom until the defendant went and got it with her bloody hands and put it in there. And how do we know that? She goes and gets the gun, she walks, and keep in mind, Mr. Barron's body is not here anymore because the paramedics have already taken him away. He's laying right there. She has to step over his dead body, through his blood, with her bloody footprints, to the bed. She gets the holster, unsnaps the holster, takes the gun out of the holster, walks back over to Mr. Barron's body. She knows she needs a defense. What's the most easy defense for her to think of? I'm going to make it look like he was firing this gun back at me. So she gets his Beretta, she bends down at a low angle, no more than 12 to 16 inches off of the ground, gets Mr. Barron's hand, puts it either on the gun, near the gun, and she tries to fire, but it jams. So she pulls the slide back, a bullet comes out. She leans back down, she tries again, jams again. Pulls the slide, bullet falls out. Let's try for a third time. Bends back down, fires the first shot, fires the second shot. Third shot goes off. Her hand, we know, got caught in the slide because she was holding it at an awkward angle, all the way down by Mr. Barron's body, so she gets slide bite, there and there. From the slide, her hand is obstructing the slide, and we also know that because the casing never came out, because she didn't have a good grip on the gun. She's holding it awkwardly, and she shoots it that high off of the ground. That is how high off the ground those shots were fired. Look where the trajectory is headed. That high off of the ground, right to Mr. Barron's dead body. We know he didn't fire those. because he's face down on the ground dead. She did. There's the slide bite she got from when she bent down on the ground and her hand got caught in the slide. Then what does she do with the gun? Well, to continue on with her cover-up, she places the gun right next to Mr. Barron's left hand. It's no coincidence that that gun is laying on top of the pool of blood placed there right next to his left hand. Then what does she do? Still in cover-up mode, so she goes and finds all the bullets she can find, all the casings that she can find, continuing to step over Mr. Barron's dead body, walking all through his blood, into the bathroom with her bloody footprints and flushes those casings. And we know that those casings were flushed from that upstairs bathroom because they were found in the septic tank line. Then what does she do? Keep in mind, what she does isn't render aid to Mr. Barron. What she does isn't try and perform CPR, something that she is, as a doctor, certified in doing. She leans down next to Mr. Barron's dead body and starts wiping up the blood because she's more worried about the blood on her feet and the blood on her floor than she is about her boyfriend's dead body laying face down right in front of her. She walks all over the room. She's carrying that towel. You heard Sergeant Durham talk about these blood drops. Those are blood drops from a 90-degree angle dripping off of an object. Right, mixed in with all those bloody footprints. She's walking around, wiping blood, carrying the bloody towel that's dripping everywhere. It's getting on the bed. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why this defendant has been charged with murder. Because unfortunately for the defendant, while she might lie, the evidence sure doesn't. So let's look at malice murder, count 1. These are the elements that you have to find beyond a reasonable doubt to find the defendant guilty of malice murder. That she, with malice, caused the death of James Barron by shooting him. That's count 1. Counts 2 and 3 are both felony murder. Count 2 is that in the commission of an aggravated assault, she caused the death of James Barron, and then count 3 is in the commission of a criminal damage to property. In the first degree, she caused the death of James Barron. And I see all of you guys writing. I just want you to know that you will have the indictment with all these elements. You'll have the charges. So this won't be the last time you get to see all these elements, just in case. If you want to take notes, absolutely do it. I just want to make sure you all know this won't be the last time you see these elements. Count 4, aggravated assault. So like I said, count 2, felony murder, is based off of this aggravated assault, right? So she committed an aggravated assault, and in doing so, killed James David Barron. So what is aggravated assault? That she assaulted James Barron with a deadly weapon, in this case a firearm, an object which, when used offensively, is likely to and does result in bodily injury by firing said weapon through a door in the direction of James Barron. That's what aggravated assault is, essentially using a deadly weapon. A firearm is a deadly weapon. When used offensively, shooting it is likely to, or did in this case, result in serious bodily injury by firing the weapon through a door in the direction of James Barron. Doing that, firing a door, or firing a firearm through the door in the direction of James Barron, is what caused his death. That is both aggravated assault, count 4, as well as the felony murder, count 2. What is criminal damage to property in the first degree? This is the basis of the other felony murder. That she knowingly and without authority interfered with a door in a manner so as to endanger human life by shooting the door of a room that was occupied by James Barron. So what does that mean? Essentially what criminal damage in the first degree is that she knowingly interfered with a door, so that means damaging a door. That she without authority damaged the door. What that means is essentially when you have shared property, for example, they both share this house together. Both of their names are on the deed. This is a shared house. When you have shared property, she has to have the authority to damage the property. In this case, I don't believe that there's going to be any evidence that Mr. Barron gave her the authority to shoot the door and kill him. And she shot that door, she damaged that door in a manner that endangered Mr. Barron's life. That's essentially criminal damage to property in the first degree. Count 6, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, is very straightforward that she had a firearm while she committed the aggravated assault. And lastly, count 7, tampering with evidence, essentially that she knowingly concealed physical evidence. In this case, it's the shell casings and bullets with the intent to obstruct her own prosecution. So like I said, ladies and gentlemen, those are the elements that you have to find each one of those beyond a reasonable doubt in order to find the defendant guilty of each one of those counts. So the evidence doesn't lie. What evidence do we have that we definitively know does not lie in this case? We know that the gunshot was 8.5 inches above the lock. Not only that, but we know that this gunshot was fired at an upward angle, not at a downward angle in the direction of the lock, but at an upward angle in the direction of Mr. Barron. And I know that there was discussion, Mr. Willis had his arms and said she was nervous, so she must have been going like this. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know that she could be that far off shooting the lock off of the door if she closed her eyes. I think even if she had walked up to the door from right here and closed her eyes, she would have been closer to the lock on that door. At most, she would have been shooting at a downward angle towards the lock. But instead, she's quite literally shooting in the opposite direction of the door. That is the evidence in this case. That the shot was fired at an angle. What that means is that she didn't walk straight up on it and try and shoot the lock off like she says she did. She came at an angle. At an angle to better be able to aim at Mr. Barron. Not straight on, while Mr. Barron's voice is coming from the right, but at an angle, so that she can have better aim to hit her bullseye. That it was 6 inches away from the tip of the tip of her gun, 6 inches at most from that door, is the evidence that we know in this case that does not lie. No one's disputing that David is behind that locked door, and the evidence is very clear that he is taking a defensive stance behind the wall, behind the locked door. Because he's, again, shot through the wall, through his left arm, through the side of his body, and then the bullet landed in the right side of his chest cavity. We know that the shell casings were flushed. She finally admitted it after she got caught with the shell casings having been flushed. And I want to talk to you about the holster. Why is the holster so important in this case? Because the defendant told Investigator Meffert over and over and over again that when I walked in that room, what was on the ground was the victim. My phone is what she said, so her phone, his gun, and his holster was laying next to his body on the floor. That's what she told Investigator Meffert over and over again. So let's look at the holster. First of all, we know the holster wasn't on the floor when law enforcement got there because it's on the bed. So was this holster ever actually even on the ground next to Mr. Barron's body? Well, this is the picture that you saw when Sergeant Durham was testifying, and he talked to you about how the blue fluorescent is blood. And if you'll notice, there's blue fluorescent on the body of the holster where someone would pick it up, and there's blue fluorescent on the snap of the holster. But notice where there's no blood, the strap. There is not a single drop of blood on the snap of that holster. What is that consistent with? Someone with a bloody hand picking up the holster with their other bloody hand, unsnapping the holster, taking the gun out, and putting it on the bed. That's what that evidence shows. If that holster was laying next to Mr. Barron's dead body, there would be at least one singular drop of blood on the snap of that holster. And we know that she wouldn't put the holster on the bed because her footprints are leading right up to the bed. Her bloody footprints lead right up to the bed where the holster is sitting. And not only that, but she places the gun next to his left hand after he's been killed. And I know we heard lots of different testimony. First, with Investigator Meffert, she said, oh, the gun was laying right there and I just pushed it out of the way. And then she testified that she tried to kill herself, but the gun was in the holster on the bed, and that's when she took the gun out of the holster. And then she said, actually, I don't remember where the gun was, and I don't remember if the gun was in the holster, and then it just turned into a bunch of I don't remembers. She didn't push the gun out of the way. She didn't go pick up the gun to shoot herself. She got the gun, staged the crime scene, and then planted the gun next to his left hand. We know that she tried to wipe up the scene. There's the bloody towel with all the droplets all over the bedroom. And we know that David had absolutely no alcohol in his system at the time of death, regardless of the continuous times that she tried to tell people that he'd been drinking too much that night. Jack Daniels and beer, Jack Daniels and beer. I told him he was drinking too much, and he got mad. He was drinking Jack Daniels and beer. No, he wasn't. Then she tried to cover that up by saying, oh, well, what I meant was earlier in the day he was drinking too much. That's what I meant, earlier in the day. There wasn't even a Jack Daniels bottle in the house. There wasn't an empty beer can in the house. He has my journal, he has my phone. He kept yelling, he has my journal, he has my phone. I wanted my journal, I wanted my phone. No, he didn't. The journal was downstairs in the living room. The gunshots fired outside the bedroom, no more than 16 inches off the ground. And we're going to talk about that again later, but that evidence does not lie. What is malice? Malice is not ill will or hatred. The unlawful intent to kill without justification. Essentially, what malice is for the malice murder is the intent to kill. No premeditation is required. I know that TV sometimes likes to make everybody think that you have to have premeditated murder. You have to have this plan, this thought out premeditated plan. That's not the case. Malice can be formed in an instant. The second this defendant got her Glock, walked up to this door and held it 6 inches away from the door, that is malice. The intent to kill has been formed from the second she decided to raise the gun, point it at the door, and fire. No motive is required to be proven, although in this case there's plenty of motive, but I did want to put that in there because that is the law, that technically no motive is required, and that's because sometimes people kill people for no reason at all. In this case, we know that's not the case, but that's the law. So how do we know that this defendant intended to kill Mr. Barron? Well, like I said, going to get your gun while he's already locked himself in the bedroom door, walking up to the door, 6 inches away at an angle, and firing in the direction of his voice while threatening him is malice. Mr. Barron hiding behind this wall while she's shooting at him is malice. Going to get Mr. Barron's gun, planting it in the crime scene to make it look like he threatened her with it is malice. Getting that gun, placing it next to his dead body to make it look like he was shooting at her, and then telling the officers on scene that he shot at her is malice. Standing over his dead body, getting a towel and wiping up the blood is malice. Walking over his dead body, through his blood, collecting the shell casings and flushing them down the toilet to hide evidence is malice. Control follow through, hit the bullseye, malice. Looking at the Hall County Jail, and I know that there was discussion about whether or not she deleted that search. I don't know why that mattered. Whether or not she deleted the post wasn't the point. The point was, 3 hours before she calls 911 for murdering her boyfriend, she's looking at a tab on her phone about the Hall County Jail. Days before the murder, she's looking up the Hall County Jail. That's malice. We know that Mr. Mr. Barron is dead, and we know that she shot him. The question was why? Malice. Because she intended to kill him. Aggravated assault. I want to talk about the underlying felonies before we get to the felony murder. We know that she had a firearm, and we know that when you shoot a firearm at someone, it can result in bodily injury, and in this case did result in bodily injury. And we know that she fired that gun through a door in the direction of James Barron. That is aggravated assault. You should find the defendant guilty of count 4. And because he died when she intentionally pointed that gun in the direction of Mr. Barron and fired, you should find him guilty of count 2, felony murder. No malice is required for the 2 counts of felony murder. Malice is not required. All that's required for you to find the defendant guilty of the 2 felony murder counts is if you find that the elements of each one of those underlying felonies has been met beyond a reasonable doubt, and you find that Mr. Barron is dead. So let's talk about criminal damage to property. Well, we know that she intentionally shot the door. She's told you that over and over and over again. Why she shot the door is what we're differing on with the defendant. But there's no debate about whether or not she knowingly interfered with the door, and there's no debate about the fact that her and Mr. Barron own that property together, so she's without authority to do so. And she did it in a way that endangered human life because Mr. Barron is dead. Damaging a door by shooting it when someone is occupying a bedroom is endangering a human life. Even if Mr. Barron hadn't died, that is endangering a human life. Even if she completely missed Mr. Barron, getting a gun, shooting it at a door, endangers human life when there's somebody on the other side of that door. That's why you should find the defendant guilty of criminal damage to property in the first degree, and that's also why you should find the defendant guilty of count 3 felony murder, because he did die. Because she fired a gun at a door in a way that endangered Mr. Barron's life because he died. This count 5, is very straightforward, this is count 6, I apologize. She had a firearm when she committed the aggravated assault. That's it. We know she flushed the shell casings and bullets. And what other reason does she have to flush that unless it's to obstruct with the prosecution of herself? We know that she was doing that to obstruct with the prosecution of herself because everything she did that night, she did to try and obstruct the prosecution of herself. Planting the gun, wiping up the blood, flushing the shell casings, lying, everything she was doing to protect herself. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Those are all the elements for every count that this defendant is charged with. To find her guilty of every single count in the indictment beyond a reasonable doubt, that's everything. What about the defendant? What did she say? Because while the physical evidence doesn't lie, we know she lied over and over and over and over and over again. So first, let's talk about her behavior on the scene. Contrary to what their paid-for opinion expert said on the stand about her opinion or about her behavior on the scene, we all saw the defendant's behavior on that body cam. We all saw it, 3 hours of it. The fake crying, the dry heaving, the fake throwing up, the fake passing out with her eyes wide open. I don't know why the question was asked about, can you have a panic attack with your eyes open? That wasn't what I asked. I asked the officer if her eyes ever closed when she passed out, when she slowly and dramatically collapsed to the ground like 3 or 4 times with her eyes wide open. The 3 hours that she sat there and wailed without a single tear coming out of her eyes. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm a big crier, so I feel like I'm an expert in this subject. When you cry, even at a slow, silent cry, you're gonna have a snotty nose. You're gonna be wiping your nose with the back of your hand. You're gonna be wiping your nose with the sleeve on your arm. You're gonna need to blow your nose. Your nose is gonna be all red. You're gonna be wiping tears from your eyes. Not once. You watch that 3-hour body cam again if you want. You can ask the judge and look for it. And wait for one single time where she wipes a tear from her eye or snot from her nose. And you won't find one. She put on the world's biggest show in the history of shows. She really should be an award-winning actress, to be honest, because that was a show. And not only that, but what did she say on the body cam? Because she's lying through her body language, but she's also lying with her words. From the second deputies get on scene, she's lying to them. He made me go up the stairs. I got dragged down the stairs. He shot at me. She says that 5 times I counted. He shot at me. 5 times she told responding officers while her boyfriend is laying dead upstairs, tells them that he shot at her, and that is a complete and bull-faced lie. He is literally lying face down in a pool of his blood upstairs. She's pretending to be distraught about that while lying about him shooting at her. He grabbed me by the neck and dragged me upstairs. A lie. I said he'd been drinking too much. She says that twice on body cam. I said he'd been drinking too much and he got mad at me. She's lying about him shooting at her. She's lying about him dragging her up the stairs. She's lying about him being drunk. Lie, 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 lie from the second law enforcement gets involved with this case. And then she says he made me leave the night of the DUI. We know that story changes a whole bunch. So let's talk about what she told Investigator Mefford. How about the kitchen incident? The elaborate, long, detailed story about her in the kitchen with Mr. Barron playing with his gun the night of the murder. She told that story to Investigator Mefford, at least 2 or 3 times, because it made no sense. So Investigator Mefford kept asking, can you please explain to me this situation again? I need to understand better. Can you please explain it to me? And she goes into so much detail about this complete and utter lie. I was brushing my teeth, and he was going to go upstairs to sleep, and then he got his gun, and then I followed him into the kitchen. This is, by the way, after they had already started arguing, she said that. Then he hands me the gun in the holster and says, unsnap the holster and take it out. Why did she say that to Investigator Mefford? She's making up this whole story. We know that, right? Why was she so specific? She says it multiple times. I unsnapped the holster and I took the gun out. Because she's planting seeds. In case they find my fingerprints on this holster, I need to have a story for why those are there. Plants the seed. I unsnapped the holster and took the gun out. Then she says, he put it in my hand. He wanted to see how it felt. He wanted to see how it fit in my hand. Then she tells Investigator Mefford, he wanted me to put my finger on the trigger to see if it reached. Why did she say that? So specific of a lie. He wanted me to put my finger on the trigger to see if it reached. Just in case her finger's found on the trigger of his gun, have to have a story for that one. I put my hand on the slide. He wanted me to rack it. Putting her prints all over the rack of the gun. Then all the bullets came out. They all just came out, she says, and then I went to go throw them away in the trash, but he wanted me to go flush them in the toilet. Every single lie about that story was said for a reason. He was drinking too much. He was drinking Jack Daniels, maybe some beer. Here we go again. He must be a drunk. Not a drop of alcohol in his system when he died. Repeatedly tells him I never picked up the shell casings or bullets. We know that's a lie. Over and over. He asks, no, I never did that. I don't know why I would do that. Over and over and over again. I never shot towards the stairs. I only shot towards the door. I never shot anywhere else. I shot that one time at the door, never anywhere else. Only place I shot that door. I didn't touch anything else other than the door when I tried to open it. That's what she says first. I didn't touch anything else. His gun was right there by his leg, holster on the floor too. His gun was right there, right next to my phone. And the holster, all right there. All a lie. Never shot his gun. Never, ever, ever shot his gun. I don't think he shot his gun. Now we're backing up a little bit. Because the first story about how he shot his gun really didn't make sense in the first place. She doesn't really know what to say. She hasn't had enough time to really formulate this plan. So now she's starting to back off of it. Maybe it was a door slam. I don't really know. Maybe he shot his gun. Maybe it was a door slam. Why does she say this? I even reached down and touched his phone in his back pocket. Why did she say that? I want you to ask yourself why she said that. Because defense has made the biggest deal about the fact that Mr. Barron must have had her phone and his phone when he went up and locked himself in that room. And those phones must have traveled up the stairs together. They called a super experienced expert to the stand to tell you that those phones traveled up the stairs together. Who brought them up the stairs together? First of all, who did that? Even if we agree that that 12-second lapse was just the phones not being regulated and it wasn't the defendant following Mr. Barron up the stairs with her own phone, even if we believe that those phones came up the stairs at the same time, who brought them up there? And why is she talking about touching his phone? Maybe it's because once she got in the room and she's planting evidence in the crime scene, she goes and gets Mr. Barron's phone and puts it in his pocket. Got my phone, got his phone, gonna walk up the stairs, puts his phone in his pocket, cleans up the rest of the scene, calls 911. We know he didn't have the journal in the room with him. Then all of a sudden she says, I touched everything in there. So first we went from I touched nothing to I touched everything. Because he keeps asking her, because her story's not adding up. Your story's not adding up. I don't understand. Please explain it to me. It's not adding up. I don't understand. Oh, well, actually, really, I touched everything. Really, I just touched everything. I touched his phone in his back pocket, pushed the gun out of the way. My hands are all in his blood. This guy would text me, but I told him about the guy. Now all of a sudden, they have motive for Mr. Barron seeing the text, and now he's in this horrible rage and forces her to commit aggravated sodomy on him. I just pushed the gun out of the way. Oh, I was waiting for police, sitting on the stairs. We saw her. She's wiping up the blood. She's walking down the stairs, sees the deputy, turns around, goes back up the stairs, does some last-minute cleanup next to Mr. Barron's dead body, then comes to the stairs 2 minutes later. And her body language in the interview, we all saw it. I put one tiny clip in there just because I felt this was a good encapsulation of how she acted in this interview. This is after she finds out Mr. Barron has not made it. This is after that, and she's wailing and fake crying and all the things. And at one point, I want you to watch, she gets up, she goes, and first she bangs her arms against the wall, something she does many, many times, both on scene as well as in the interview room, bangs her arms on the wall of the door, or on the wall. Then she turns around, leans her back up against the wall, pauses, looks over at Investigator Mefford to make sure that he's watching. Then the wailing begins again. Oops. Let's watch it again with sound.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh.
By the way, that goes on for 10 minutes. I counted. 10 minutes, nobody says a single word, and she does that without a single tear, without a single reach of a tissue, without a single wipe of the nose. 10 whole minutes. beyond a reasonable doubt. What does that mean? It's not beyond all doubt, it's not beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it's not to a mathematical certainty. What beyond a reasonable doubt is a doubt for which reason can be given. It's a doubt for which reason can be given. It's about your common sense, and it's about your reason. It's not a doubt for which an unreasonable reason can be given. It's a doubt which a reasonable reason can be given. And at the beginning of this trial, Ms. Bagwell got up and she told you that this case wasn't going to be about the what, and it wasn't going to be about the who, but it was going to be about the why. Why did this defendant shoot and kill Mr. Barron? And ladies and gentlemen, when you look at the evidence in this case, when you look at the actual evidence in this case, there's only one reasonable answer as to why. Unhinged, obsessive rage. That's why. So I'm going to sit down, like the judge told you yesterday. Mr. Willis is going to have a chance to get up and speak with you, and then I get one last chance to argue, and then I promise you will literally never have to hear from me ever again. But while you're listening to Mr. Willis, I want you to ask yourself an important question. What in this case is actual evidence, and what in this case is a story? Thank you.